Welcome back to Inside Criminal Minds, the series dedicated to dissecting the actions of an elite FBI team. If you're new to the series, there is a link in the description down below. Last time on Inside Criminal Minds, Elle is dealing with the fallout of the Fisher King and decides to shoot a suspect in cold blood and got arrested. And that's where this episode begins. At the FBI HQ, Elle discusses getting back on the team, and Hodge demands a psych eval for her, which Elle takes as a slap in the face. Next, we see a kid running through the woods with two kids telling a story of a killer that targets children, which is also convenient because the unsub targets children in the woods. At the BAU, they begin talking about the victims and how it's interesting that they don't have a sexual component linked to them, which is good because the last couple episodes were a little weird. Anyway, they were just beaten to death with blunt instruments, but as they begin to leave, Hodge is informed that Elle forgoes her psych eval, and according to the FBI, she is in the wind. As the rest of the team leave to catch the unsub, Hodge stays behind in order to investigate, because as somebody who was begging to be on the team earlier on in the season, Elle is really exhibiting some weird behaviors. For example, he calls her in order to inform her about the new case, and he's sent straight to voicemail, which is both infuriating and unlike her. But after she leaves, and Hodge following close behind, Reed and some of the other team discuss Elle. And it is interesting that Reed is the one that actually brings her up, but they're also explaining her mysterious absence, considering she has been cleared by the FBI to return. But Gideon, the wise and sage leader, brings everyone back on track, again showing how amazing he is as a leader. And the team talk about victimology in an attempt to find any kind of pattern. However, this pattern does get shot down when JJ gets a call that blows that theory out of the water, because initially they believed that the killer was looking for little boys and is now targeting girls as well. And during this conversation, they talk about fears, which is where we learn that Reed is afraid of the dark, which is extremely funny, mostly because he spends his entire career trying to find the darkest depths of a person's heart, and darkness is the thing that freaks him out. Also, in a future scene, he apparently is afraid of elevators not working correctly.
Push it! It's not a push, pull. I'm doing it. Nothing's happening. Pry the door open. Just.
Gideon then splits the team up, and when they land, Gideon analyzes the crime scene and deduces that the unsub is local, and that the victims had even the slightest bit of trust with the unsub. Meanwhile, Morgan and Reed talk with the coroner, and they gain more insight in the killer's mind, with Morgan floating the idea that the killer might be a hunter. Afterwards, Gideon talks with the parents as Morgan and JJ talk with the children on precautions that need to be in place in order to keep their children safe. You know the old shtick: buddy system, curfew, typical things that the FBI has worked on in order to help other people in these kind of dire circumstances. However, one of the victim's moms brings up her son's hat. That becomes a point of contention later. But next we see those two kids from the beginning goading a kid to tempt fate by knocking on a man's door, who is the basis of all of the rumors of a wild killer in the woods. You could call it an old folk tale. Even though the kids just heard from the FBI warning them that an actual killer is out on the loose, specifically looking for children. At first I thought this was unrealistic. Then I started thinking about when I was a child, I would do something this stupid. So kudos on the writers to write believable children. They do convince this poor child to muster up the courage to ring the doorbell. And then the two original children flee, leaving him by himself. Also, they show a person chilling in the house to heighten the tension. Obviously, this kid is the next victim, so it's probably okay that I didn't really get that invested in him. Anyways, Hotch does then contact Gideon to update him about Elle's situation, believing she is running when we get the first look at the counselor's son. This is when Gideon and the team announce the profile that is interrupted by the kid's mom, who divulges her son is missing. And kudos to this series that they don't perpetrate the stereotype that you have to wait 24 hours before reporting someone missing. If you genuinely believe somebody is missing, report it immediately. Don't wait 24 hours. Anyway, the team work as quickly as possible. JJ even showing her nurturing side, talking to her other son, and this is another reason why Gideon is the king of profilers. He notices that the son is a little uneasy, which is where he convinces him to talk, revealing some pretty important information about the folktale and possibly where his brother is. And Morgan is quite upset that nobody told him about the legend sooner. Meanwhile, Elle is at the graveyard
confessing your sins
to her father when Hotch shows up, and Elle laments on how she felt after the Fisher King. Also, how she felt betrayed, and the person she feels the most betrayed by is standing right in front of her. And this is interesting because she never actually blames the Fisher King for doing what he did. It seems like she places more of the blame on Hotch, which is understandable because he was the one that put her in that precarious situation. But I feel like it's more Anderson's fault for basically leaving her, but the biggest blame is on the actual Fisher King. If it wasn't for him having to send a message to the team, she wouldn't have been shot. She does show her vulnerability to Hotch, which is a really nice touch, and Hotch does get a great scene relating to her. Also, throughout the episode, it seems like he knows that Elle was in the wrong, but seeing as he can't prove it, she gets a free pass. Back with the rest of the team, they go to the house. Reed and Gideon clear the outside, while Morgan and a beat cop clear the inside. And among other things, Reed finds a decapitated head of a deer. This is when Morgan realizes that the power is out. They also realize someone was in the house earlier today, and thankfully Gideon finds the kid safe. He was hiding from the killer, but this is very interesting because in any other episode, this kid wouldn't have been long for the world. Reed then calls Garcia, and Reed gets scared.
Garcia, could you at least pretend not to enjoy that rumor so much since I've actually entered the house?
Sensitive. Sorry.
But Garcia reveals how the house owner, Finnegan, had a wife that was apparently murdered. And Morgan scares the bejesus out of Reed, which always makes me smile. It is interesting how skittish Reed is in this episode. Again, he catches serial killers and is deathly afraid of the dark.
Yeah, Reed, why are you still afraid of the dark?
Because of the inherent absence of light.
Oh.
And during the investigation, they find plenty of guns and trophies linked to the victims. And while the cops are searching, they get called off, but not before finding the only suspect covered in leaves, and also 6 feet under, making the team go back to square one. Also, we learn he died of natural causes, meaning the killer didn't get this guy, but it is a little weird that he was purposefully covered by leaves, meaning that the unsub didn't want him to be found. And Reed finds out what happened to the wife. She actually just left him, and he would look to see if she would ever return, but she never did, bolstering the rumors that he was watching his prey. This does show that we give our own prejudices on people to frame them in a bad light without knowing who they are and what their actual motives are. However, the team find eaten food, all except for creamed spinach, that has duct tape put on it to prevent accidental eating, and reinforces the profile of someone who is meticulous. This is where they get the prints off of the trays. However, this is interrupted by a call to Gideon about Elle. This is when Reed reveals he talked with Elle on the last job before the kill, and also confides in Morgan she was drinking. Then Morgan, JJ, and Reed discuss fears when JJ tells the story on how she used to be a camp counselor counselor in her hometown that was in the woods, and she found one of the camp counselors dead, which I would show, but YouTube copyright. She does an amazing job of telling the story and even gets her lie past both Morgan and Reed, which is interesting because in a future season, she has to lie to the entire team. Foreshadowing or just a convenient plot device. But afterwards, they discuss Reed's fear of the dark briefly when Garcia interrupts them and they find a potential suspect in the counselor that has been helping them and had his prints on the trays, making him suspect number one. And they go to his house, and when will white guys learn to not run from Morgan? Because the counselor promptly gets tackled with a precarious hat that matches a description that one of the victims' mom gave to the FBI, meaning he has one of the trophies of a victim. That's really not good for him, and honestly, did not see that one coming. But this is great because now the killer's locked up, and all they need is a confession that is hopefully supplied by Morgan, who begins grilling this poor man, even bringing up his divorce. This is where he gets the counselor to lash out about his performance in bed, which I find funny.
Okay, James, that was exciting.
And they find out the fingerprints, other than the counselor, doesn't match any of the victims, so there's another potential victim. Also, this is the first time I've noticed that in the background, when Reed and JJ are talking, Reed is trying to, and successfully, picking handcuffs with a paperclip. It is interesting because earlier in the show, we see that he's obsessed with magic. It's just fun little details like that that could have just gone by the wayside. Anyway, JJ laments on taking the counselor's child into CPS, even though it's her job, when she finds out the son never made it to school, implying that the latest victim is the counselor's kid. Meanwhile, Reed, JJ, and the other cops search the counselor's home, where he finds an EpiPen and dairy products sealed with duct tape, meaning that someone in the house is allergic to dairy. And again, Gideon masterfully uses this by offering the counselor some milk, which he takes, proving that the son is more than likely the unsub. After that, we see some kids leaving the bus, two of which go in one direction, whereas one stays behind and is met up with our unsub. And I wanted to wait to reveal this kid until now. That is Cameron Monaghan. And if you don't know who he is an extremely competent actor who I actually really enjoy. And I feel like his propensity for being a psychopath bleeds into one of his best roles as Jerome Valeska. 'Cause you ain't seen nothing yet. By far not the best Joker, but he's definitely in the top 5. And I feel like this episode really lent a hand to him becoming that, showing how well, even at a young age, he can play a psychopath. Anyway, the team comb the forest in order to hopefully find the victim alive. This is when the unsub starts showing his insanity. And luckily, the victim is able to get away from him, giving chase. At the bus stop, the team kick themselves for educating the unsub, which, side tangent, it didn't make sense for us to do lockdown drills in the school because all you're doing is just teaching the person who is the potential threat how to go around it. But anyway, she runs away from the unsub where he is trying to manipulate his victim. Then the team finds her bag, and as she rests, the unsub swings his bat and she screams in order to get somebody's attention, and Gideon comes in and disarms the child. It is nice to see that the father has a moment to see his child off. Also, he gets a pseudo apology from Morgan. As they leave on the jet, Reed continues to lament about not saying anything to the team about Elle, and Morgan reassuring him that Reed did the right thing, which shows their bond as friends when Hotch calls Gideon to inform him Elle is leaving the team. And Elle explains her trauma to Hotch in an extremely good way. She really lays it on the line, and the showrunners expertly discharge Elle in the best way possible. This episode did a great job of balancing the case with everything going on with Elle. It is sad to see her go, but the showrunners knew what needed to be done, and it makes room for Emily Prentiss in future episodes. But I enjoyed her chemistry with Reed. Again, she confided in Reed in the past episode. I think it's mostly because he saved her life in a previous episode, but I liked their friendship. They did a really good job of riffing off of each other. I am also going to miss her humor with Morgan. It is interesting that she was the one chomping at the bit to be on the team, and she is the first member to leave. Also, this was a good series of episodes in order to get her off of the team. In future episodes, some of the main characters leave without an actual farewell, which is sad, mainly because if you're gonna have a main character leave, I like there to be an actual process of it. Also, at the beginning of the episode, it is interesting that the kid running through the woods is actually the unsub wearing the hat of the most previous victim. I never noticed that until I was making these videos. Also, this episode had an interesting way of storytelling, showing all the aspects of the unsub and how the team was able to capture him. Thank you for watching. If you are curious what happens to a spy when he gets fired, check out my other series, Burned Notice. Link in the description. And as always, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.